Welcome. I'm Richard Clarke. I'm hosting this Satsang series. We will light incense to get started. I have followed Ramana Maharshi since 1980. I first attended Satsang in Santa Cruz, California with a self-realized sage, Nomi. I did this for about 15 years. Few have heard of him because he's not at all interested in name or fame. Nomi's realization came in his late teens after intense practice of Ramana's self-inquiry. Upon retirement in 2006, my wife Carol and I moved to Tiruvannamalai, home of Ramana Ashram. We lived there for 8 years, then relocated to Lake Chapala near Guadalajara, Mexico. I've offered this kind of satsang for more than 10 years, first in India, now in Mexico. I'm just a seeker like you are. I have been blessed with this deep teaching and practice and just want us to share it. This is a Ramana Maharshi self-knowledge satsang focused on self-knowledge, since, as the Bhagavad Gita says, self-knowledge is what brings self-realization. So I say, know yourself and be always at peace. This session, since we're unfamiliar with each other, is an introductory one. I'll talk briefly about Ramana Maharshi and the Advaita Vedanta, which he taught and lived. Now, first about Ramana. Ramana was a spiritual teacher, a yani, or one who knows. He lived from 1879 to 1950 in South India, most of the time in a small town, Tiruvannamalai, adjacent to the ancient sacred Indian mountain Arunachala. It was Arunachala that drew Ramana to this place after his self-realization at the age of 16, when he had a death experience where he became aware of a current or force within himself, which he recognized as his true I or self, and which he later identified with the personal God or Iswara, that is to say, Shiva. Shiva stands for absolute being, absolute consciousness. Arunachala is felt to be Shiva by the people of India, so he traveled to Tiruvannamalai and came home to Shiva after self-realization. He lived there the remainder of his days. His was a simple life. His teachings, too, were simple. To know God, to know reality, you just need to know yourself. Since what is called God is everything, then God is found within you as your real identity. His teaching was primarily in silence. His verbal instruction was for those who didn't get it from this silence. We'll start with this brief documentary about Ramana.
Throughout the centuries, mankind has searched for answers to questions such as, why are we here? What is the nature of God and the world around us? And is there life after death? But perhaps the ultimate of all such questions relates to our own eternal reality. And it is this quest for who we really are that lies at the heart of all spiritual endeavor. India, the world's 6th largest country with more than 1 billion inhabitants, an enchanting land filled with great vestiges of divine inspiration. It's here that sages and philosophers like Adi Shankaracharya, Swami Vivekananda, and the poet Saint Kabir have delved deep into this mystery called life. Proponents of the Hindu philosophy of Advaita, they held that our real nature is divine. God is our innermost self, an underlying reality that exists in every being. The basic teaching is that we should awaken ourselves from the mistaken belief that we exist as separate individuals.
Advaita simply means that the ultimate reality is non-separate.
The aim of Advaita is to liberate the soul from a cycle of reincarnation.
In our daily life, the life of duality, which has to be, even in that life, everything is connected.
The path towards salvation is through knowledge. Knowledge of the self and the realization that one's soul or self or Atman is non-different, absolutely identical with the absolute self.
To better understand the philosophy, we set off on an adventure that led us to the teachings of 3 revered saints of this ancient and mystical land. Our first destination was the small city of Tiruvannamalai in the south of India, where we had arranged to meet David Godman. David is regarded as the foremost contemporary author on the lives of some of India's famous mystics, including the great sage Ramana Maharshi.
I first heard about Ramana probably in 1974 when I picked up a book in my college bookstore in England. I devoured it in an afternoon, and I have to say the effect of reading that book was to completely silence my mind. Up till that point I'd been a voracious reader of spiritual books, philosophical texts. I had an insatiable curiosity to find things out. And what was different with this text is that it didn't provide any answers. It simply pulled the rug out completely from under the whole questioning edifice.
David's first encounter with the teachings of Ramana Maharshi was so profound that he was irresistibly drawn to India. This fateful expedition was to be a major turning point on his own journey of discovery, and he now calls India his home. Starting out as a librarian at Maharishi's spiritual center in Tiruvannamalai, David has dedicated his life to authoring meticulously researched books on the saint.
Ramana Maharshi is probably the most distinguished and widely respected Hindu saint of the last 100 years.
Ramana was renowned for the direct method of self-inquiry that he taught. He said that we exist as the supreme self at all times, and that we need only awaken to this reality by seeking the true source of abiding happiness. our own inner self. Ramana's insights have provided answers to seekers all over the world. But what was the story that led the Maharishi to these eternal truths? Venkataraman, later to be known to the world as Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharshi, was born in 1879 in a small town near Madurai in South India on a day sacred to the Hindu god Shiva. His parents were renowned for being both charitable and intensely devoted to God. While there was nothing particularly distinctive about his early years, he had a remarkable spiritual awakening at the age of 16. Sitting in a small room in his uncle's house, the thought occurred to him that he was about to die. The feeling of impending death did not unnerve the young boy. Instead, it culminated in a spontaneous inquiry, during which Ramana recognized his true nature as immortal spirit. Losing all interest in his former life, the young sage decided to leave home. He wrote a brief note to his family and secretly embarked on a journey to the holy pilgrimage site of Arunachala. After an epic and eventful train ride, Ramana arrived at the city's main temple. Although it was closed at the time, all the doors are said to have miraculously opened as the sage made his way to the innermost shrine. The temple became the first place of residence for Ramana. Here, he sat for long periods of time, deeply absorbed in the bliss of the self. So complete was his disassociation with his physical body that he remained oblivious, even after being assailed by street urchins and insects. In 1899, Ramana moved up the hill to Virupaksha cave, which was to be his home for the next 16 years. His silent radiance inevitably drew a small group of devotees to him, and he soon acquired the reputation of a sage. Shortly after being joined by his mother in 1914, Ramana moved further up the hill to Skandashram, a larger site built by one of his disciples. When his mother passed away in 1922, Bhagwan made his final move to the foot of the Arunachala mountain, where his mother had been laid to rest. As the years rolled by, a spiritual community of the Maharishi's followers developed into an ashram that still stands today. At the heart of the Ramana ashram is a small meditation room, in which pilgrims would come to seek Ramana's guidance in their spiritual pursuits. For many visitors, the all-pervading silence of Bhagwan was sufficient to enable a direct experience of the self.
Now this hall was, I think for everyone concerned, a truly magical place. I've come across so many accounts of people who were attracted to Ramana or merely came to see him casually, who came to Ramanashram, and this would be the place where they would have their first meeting, mostly. They would come with questions, they would come with problems, they would come with headfuls of ideas, and the most common response was that everything they brought with them simply disappeared.
Whoever was in the hall, it is Bhagwan's presence dominated, regardless of which person came. That was a natural state.
The passage of time has done little to diminish the Maharishi's transformative energy, which is still tangibly felt by devotees today.
I stood before that couch where he used to sit, and then I have found my Guru. And then the questions which had been troubling me for thousands of years were answered in a minute by his silence. Why, how, I can't say, because Bhagavan is basically an inner Guru.
For those seekers who were unable to grasp the Maharishi's silent teachings, he recommended a simple method of self-inquiry, whereby attention is continually brought to the feeling of I within. Ramana said, "I exist is the only permanent self-evident experience of everyone. Nothing else is so self-evident as I am. It is only by diving deep into the spiritual heart that we can find the unconditional peace and bliss of the self.
Now let's talk about Advaita Vedanta. In spirituality, non-dualism, also called non-duality, means not two, Advaita, or one undivided without a second. Non-dualism primarily refers to a mature state of consciousness in which the dichotomy of I and others is transcended, and awareness is identified as centerless and without differences. Although this state of consciousness may appear to be spontaneous, it usually follows prolonged preparation through ascetic or meditative and contemplative practice, which may include ethical injunctions. While the term non-dualism is derived from Advaita Vedanta, descriptions of non-dual consciousness can be found within Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, and Western Christian and Neoplatonic traditions. The Asian ideas of non-dualism developed in the Vedic and post-Vedic Upanishadic philosophies around 600 BCE, as well as in the Buddhist traditions. The oldest traces of non-dualism in Indian thought are found in the early Hindu Upanishads, such as the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, as well as other pre-Buddhist Upanishads, such as the Chandogya Upanishad. Non-duality is experienced directly and is not known by the mind, which knows only by differences. Next, we will hear my teacher, Nomi, talk. This photo is from a trip in 2004 where Nomi introduced a group of us, including Carol and I, to Tiruvannamalai and Ramana ashram. Nomi is on the left with close cropped hair, all in white. I'm the guy with the hat. Carol is next to me. We moved there 2 years later. Nome was realized in his late teens after a spontaneous experience of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. He was then introduced to Ramana and practiced inquiry intensely for 3 years until he had the realization that no longer comes and goes. He has taught in California since the 1970s. Now we'll listen to him talk. Nomi's voice is a little rough. He's had Parkinson's for more than 15 years, and it's harder for him to talk.
Today is Guru Purnima, yet the Purnam, or perfection, the perfect fullness of the Guru, Sri Bhagavan, is always. Who is Sri Ramana? Silence is perhaps the most eloquent expression of that. the truth of the Maharshi. In order to know him as he is, why, this is knowing God as God is. One must first relinquish any limitations on one's own vision. Approach as a body, one sees a body. Approach as an individual, one sees some other kind of individual. But he is not the body. And he transcends individuality or egoity entirely. The removal of one's own definition by virtue of inquiry into oneself or by deep devotion results in an absorption in the truth that he is. That is the truth of the self. The way to know what he is to know your own being. Of course, is by his grace and his teachings put into practice, that is, by self-inquiry and its resultant self-knowledge, that you know yourself. If we approach as someone seeking the truth, then he is the guru that reveals the truth, a Sadguru, a true guru that reveals the truth. If seeking that truth within ourselves, the form of the seeker is dissolved, what then remains? The greatness of that, the bliss of that, the truth of that cannot be conceived, much less described. From the position, that is the imagined perspective, of identifying oneself as an embodied individual, who he is, what that Brahman is difficult to grasp. If the I am the body conception is abandoned, and the ego is destroyed by seeking its source, by knowing its nature, then the truth of Sri Ramana is self-evident. To whom is it self-evident? To him, of course. Because if this truth is realized, that is the truth of the self within you, if the self that he knows and declares himself to be is realized within yourself, there remains nothing to you but him, that, the one absolute. Again, as long as we think in terms of individuals, this would seem utterly impossible. Abandon the false ego notion by inquiry to see what it is, and what's being indicated is self-evident. Though he is the one by whose wisdom the truth is revealed, and by whose grace everything is cared for, he is also that undivided, undifferentiated, birthless, imperishable existence, which is the only reality. To imagine yourself to be something other than that is a case of misidentification or ignorance, the cause of bondage and its resultant suffering. Meditating on the teaching he has imparted about knowing oneself, bondage proves to be an illusion, ignorance only imagination. The very seed or potential of suffering is done away with. And the ability to misidentify is utterly lost. So what can we say about the Maharshi, who he is? He is a jnani, a great sage. Yes, but more than that. He is a Sadguru who liberates from the imagined bondage all who seek him. Yet he is more than that. He stands as that which transcends the three states of waking, dreaming, and sleep. That is, stands beyond the mind and the body and the senses and everything else, including all the forms of this world. Yet he is something greater than that. He is that which is unborn and indestructible, the timeless, the spaceless. Yet even this does not adequately describe him. Consider this the next time you use his name, think about him, read a book about him, read something of his teachings. So who is Sri Ramana? You had best find that out within yourself. While inquiring within yourself, to know yourself.
Finally, we'll hear from Rupertr Spira with a message for this time of coronavirus. Rupertr Spira is English, with many books and frequent satsangs and YouTube videos. His spiritual journey started at age 16 with the discovery of the poetry of Rumi. He studied and practiced in the Sufi tradition for a few years and then was introduced to Advaita Vedanta, which became the focus of his life and practice. He has studied Ramana's teachings for many years. In the mid-1990s, Rupert met an American teacher, Robert Adams, who died 2 days after he arrived. However, while visiting, Rupert was told of another teacher, Francis Lucille. He studied with Francis Lucille for the next 10 years. Now, he might say, be neither the knower or the known. Be only the knowing of experience, and you will find yourself as everyone and everything. Now on to his talk.
everyone. I wanted to share something with you on the evening of my 60th birthday. One of my favorite poems by W.B. Yeats was written on his 50th birthday. And he said this: "My 50th year had come and gone. I sat a solitary man in a crowded London shop. An open book, an empty cup on the marble tabletop. While on the shop and street I gazed, my body of a sudden blazed, and 20 minutes, more or less, I felt that I was blessed and could bless." Well, I too sit, a solitary man, on a rock overlooking the Pacific Ocean on this March evening above Muir Beach in California. And I too feel, like W.B. Yeats, that I am blessed and can bless. I do not mean any pretension by that statement. Many of you also feel blessed and can bless. These are changing and uncertain times, but the rapid change and uncertainty and insecurity of our times brings into sharp focus that which is certain, that which is unchanging, and that which is secure, namely our own being. Our own being is the one constant factor in all changing, uncertain experience. And if we seek security and peace, we should look for it where it resides, namely in our own being. Everybody knows their own being, but not everybody knows their own being clearly. And it is for this reason that not everyone is in touch with, or not everyone feels the peace and the quiet joy that is the nature of our self or our being. For many of us, our being is so thoroughly mixed up with the content of our experience that whilst we know our being, or sense ourself, we do not know ourselves clearly. And it is for this reason that for many of us, the innate peace and the quiet, unconditional joy of our being is not fully felt in the midst of our experience. So if in these uncertain and insecure times we seek peace and joy, we should turn simply to our own being that lies behind and indeed pervades all experience. However, for many of us, our own being is first found in the background of experience, where it lies like a constant friend, unchanging, impartial, bestowing its peace on everything that we experience. All that is necessary is to turn towards ourself or our being, and if we do so, it will occasionally, suddenly, but for most of us gradually, take us into itself. So if we seek peace at this time, all that is necessary to do is to take refuge in ourself. All the peace and all the joy that we have ever truly longed for lives there. And one who is in touch with their own being is truly blessed, for they are in possession of that which is most precious in life, and that for which all people long above all else. And such a one has the capacity to bless, and by that I simply mean has the capacity to share their innate peace and their quiet, unconditional joy with whoever they come in contact with, or without words. So in these uncertain times, I wish you all the peace and the quiet joy that is the very nature of yourself. Thank you. Bye.
Now we will do a little inquiry, and I will guide you through this. So sit in a comfortable position and close your eyes and take a couple of deep breaths and just notice that you exist. You don't have to think to know this. You don't need to sense it, but you know it. Inquiry is deeper than the senses or the mind, so this is a good way to start. You exist, and you know that you exist. Then inquire, investigate within yourself. Am I a body? Which part of the body could I be? Maybe it's the whole body. Now, I know the body. Does the body know me? The body is objective to me. It's always something that I know about. You'll never find yourself in anything that is objective. You are always the knower. You're never the known. How could you be a body then? Am I the senses? Which sense could I be? Every sense, if I shut them off, I still exist. all the senses, if I shut them off, I exist. So I'm not the senses. I know the senses. The senses are objective to me. So I'm not them. How about the life force that moves in the body, the breath moving in and out, the beating heart, the flowing blood? I know all of these, and none of them know me. They also are all objective. So that's not who I am. Am I thought? Which thought am I? Am I a collection of thoughts? Has there ever been a moment when you had no thought? Did you still exist then? If you did, you can't be a thought. How about the intellect that takes these thoughts and makes the world and everything else in them? One thing that rises from the intellect is this idea of me as an individual. Is there ever a time where you don't have that idea of yourself as an individual? Maybe when you're meditating, maybe in deep dreamless sleep. The mind is quiet, the intellect is quiet in deep sleep, but you still exist. When you wake up in the morning, you said you had a good sleep. You didn't say, I didn't exist then. So if there is a moment when the intellect is not there, or your idea of yourself is not there, then that's not who you are. So if you're not a body and not the senses and not the life force that moves in the body, or not thought, or not intellect, just who are you? What is the nature of your existence? Inquire, investigate within yourself. If some idea arises as to some identity, is that something you know? Is that known to you? If it is, that's not you. You are the knower, not the known. Who am I? All right. Open your eyes and come back into the space that you're in. And we'll end by saying a short chant. Om Shanti Shanti, Shanti. If this satsang was of interest to you, I have more resources, a free book site, a YouTube site, and my blog. The URLs will be on the screen in a moment. There also will be more of these satsangs in the coming weeks. Next will be a series based on Ramana's small book, Who Am I? Thank you for watching today.